please welcome to the bright side, Dr. Ellington Darden. Good morning, Dr. Darden.
Well, Ben, I mean, that's the best introduction I have ever gotten. I was thinking, man, I want to meet that guy. You know?
Well, I'm thrilled to be talking to you because I remember seeing your pictures on the cover of magazines back when I was training, when I was doing my bodybuilding thing back in the 80s, seeing your pictures. As I recall, you were on the cover of more than one. I know you were in the magazines, but I'm pretty sure you were on the cover of more.
3 or 4 of those magazines, you know, strength and health and muscular development. It's been an interesting 40 years.
Well, for some of our younger listeners, or maybe for listeners who aren't up on the world of bodybuilding, give us a brief synopsis of your history, how you got into bodybuilding in the first place, and then maybe touch a little bit on your academic background and concentrations and what your thesis was, et cetera. And then we'll get into some of these ideas, these HIT ideas, as well as the new book.
Well, you know, I grew up in the 50s and 60s, and I was a skinny teenager like many teenagers were in those times after World War II. So I wanted to get bigger and stronger to play football and to play basketball better. And in 1958, I started a barbell training routine that a coach in the junior high school helped formalize with me. And that led to me becoming a bigger, stronger football player and an athlete. And when I went to Baylor University in 1962, I played a little football, but I got more interested in bodybuilding then because there was a bodybuilder in town that I admired, a man named Ed Cook. So I started working out with him and won the Mr. Texas contest and quite a few smaller contests in Texas, and then went to Florida State University to do graduate work in 1968 and stayed there for 5 years. And I entered a lot of contests there, both bodybuilding and powerlifting. It was a little different in those times. And in 1970, I had a chance to meet Arthur Jones, the man who was the brains behind the Nautilus exercise equipment. And when I finished up in Florida State, in 1973, I went to work with Arthur Jones and Nautilus in DeLand, Florida. So that's sort of how it started, and I was always interested in research and writing in the 60s and 70s, and Arthur Jones gave me the opportunity to follow up on that. So, like I said earlier, it's been an exciting 40 or 50 years for me.
Was Nautilus the first machine training or science? I know there were machines before, but was it the first really high tech kind of scientifically designed machine for lifting weights or for working out?
Yeah, there was a machine around before Nautilus called a Universal Gym.
That's right.
But it was a bigger machine that had a weight stacks in the middle and different stations around it. I'm sure you've seen Universal Gyms.
Yeah, I remember
Arthur Jones and Nautilus, they were the first one to have single station machines that had rotary variable resistance. So that took place in the 1970s, and by 1980, you know, there were more than 1,000 Nautilus fitness clubs throughout the United States. So that's sort of the machine age, and Arthur Jones really pushed that, and he helped revolutionize the whole fitness time in the 1970s, 80s, and 90s. So
now, what's your take on, and before we get into HIT in the book, what's your take on the difference between the machines, the Nautilus machine, or even the Universal machines, and free weights, dumbbells and barbells, et cetera?
Well, my take on it is about the same as Arthur Jones. Arthur always said a barbell is a very good machine. Unfortunately, he just never saw anybody that used a barbell correctly. You know, they slammed and banged and did their exercise repetitions way too fast. So, nevertheless, he always said the barbell was a good tool, and it's certainly an inexpensive one. But he set out to try to figure out a scientific barbell, and the Nautilus machine was the first attempt to do that. And in my opinion, a Nautilus machine, or many exercise machines nowadays, are better than using a barbell or a dumbbell because they're safer and easier to use in the proper way. So I like machine exercises, but again, you got to do the exercise machine correctly to get the most out of it. You know, it's like an automobile. An automobile is a better means of transportation than a horse. That doesn't mean you can't ride a horse and get good results from it. But an automobile certainly is an improvement on a horse. But you got problems behind an automobile. You know, you got to drive it correctly, or you can hurt yourself. You can kill yourself.
Hang on to that thought. We got to take a break, but that's a perfect lead-in to HIT. We'll talk about high-intensity training when we come back from our break. We're talking to Ellington Darden, Dr. Ellington Darden. We'll be back on the bright side right after this. Before we went to break, Dr. Darden, we were talking about the idea of technique and appropriate technique, and I think that's a perfect lead-in to what I personally think of as the ultimate program for, at least in terms of leveraging work into effect, getting the most benefit for the least amount of work, or the least amount of time, I should say. Tell us a little bit about HIT from a historical perspective and how you perfected the idea of HIT and what exactly it is.
Well, HIT stands for high intensity training. And we found out years ago in the 1960s and 70s that the intensity of the exercise is maybe the single most important factor in building muscular size and strength. That if you're looking for easy ways to exercise, and most people are, as you know, then that's a huge step in the wrong direction. So I always thought that you ought to look for ways to make the exercise harder, not easier. And usually a step in the right direction is performing each repetition of an exercise smoothly and slowly. So what I came up with was about 7 or 8 different guidelines on how you can take barbells and dumbbells or any machine exercise or even body weight exercises and make them harder and more productive. So intensity remains the key factor, the single factor that you need to carry a set of an exercise. You know, the number of repetitions that you do to failure, to momentary muscular failure, where you cannot do another repetition in good form. And usually that takes somewhere between about 40 and 70 seconds.
That's great.
So high-intensity exercise is exercise that's done repeatedly for 40 to 70 seconds.
So what you have to do in work, you gain in time. So you may work harder, but you work shorter. You save time with your.
Correct. As you get stronger, you need less exercise because you're using heavier resistance, and that heavier resistance is making more of an inroad into your body's recovery ability. So the bigger, stronger athletes that I work with, most of them only require one exercise session a week, and that exercise session only takes, from 20 to 30 minutes at most. So
20 to 30 minutes a week, once you get going anyway, for 20 to 30 minutes a week, you can maintain a nice tone. Even if you're not a bodybuilder, maintain a nice tone and maintain a nice figure and have a higher muscle to fat ratio, correct?
Absolutely, yeah.
That's awesome.
Well, for women, for men, for older people, and I've got a 12-year-old boy that I've been working with for 7 or 8 years, and he's big and strong and growing every day.
So you don't see a problem with kids exercising, kids 10, 11 years old, lifting weights, I should say?
Well, I see a problem in it, but it can be eliminated with good coaching and good supervision. I see a problem in anybody lifting weights if they don't have a good set of sensible guidelines to follow. It's just like you in talking about nutrition. There's a problem behind eating if you eat the wrong types of foods in too much of a quantity,
That's right. That's right. So there's techniques. As long as the techniques are correct, a kid as young as 10 or 11 years old can work out with weights if doing the correct technique.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. Like I said, I've been training my boy since he was since he was 4 years of age.
All right, tell us about the 30-30-30 plan.
Yeah, well, this goes back to 1972 when Arthur Jones, the man behind Nautilus, wrote an article, and it was called "Accentuate the Negative," and he was saying that in his mind he thought that the lowering part of exercise was more important than the raising, and that people ought to, instead of saying how much you can lift, it ought to be how much can you lower.
That's great.
So that started me to thinking in different directions, and it started research being done throughout the United States, and a lot of stuff's been done in the Scandinavian countries on the importance of the negative, the eccentric, the lowering portion of exercise. So this 30-30-30 has 2 lowering half repetitions that take from 20 to 30 seconds each, and in between there's a 20 to 30 second positive phase. So let's just take the push-up for an example. I mean, everyone has done a push-up. So you start in the top position, with your toes and your hands on the floor and your torso, your body straight. And instead of dropping down and trying to pound out about 10 reps quickly, you lower yourself in 30 seconds. And then you push yourself up in 30 seconds, and you lower in 30 seconds. Or maybe you can't do 30, but you can probably do 10 or 15. You do that 1 or 2 times, and wow, boy, you feel your chest, your arms, your shoulders working to a different degree than if you pounded out 10 or 15 or more repetitions quickly. So that's what my book is about, how to take body weight exercises, how to take barbell, dumbbell, and machine exercises, and do them slowly for only 1.5 repetitions. And if you get the resistance in the form right, then, boy, I tell you, all you need are about 7 or 8 exercises that way, and about 20 minutes twice a week at first, and you will stimulate large amounts of muscular size and strength.
Now, what is it about the negative? Is it that you don't have the momentum? You have less momentum. You're not throwing the weight up or pushing your body weight up really fast. What is it about the negative portion of the workout that makes it so helpful and allows you to leverage muscle building?
When you do a standard push-up, Ben, or a standard curl or a bench press where you're pushing up, or any exercise, you've got complex bonds, chemical bonds that form as the muscle contracts. And to turn it around, and when you do the lowering, you have these complex bonds that are perfect for overloading. And when you overload those bonds by going slower and smoother on the return phase, then what happens, you stretch those uncontracting muscles and slightly tear them. And
on the negative,
stretching and tearing.
Doc, we got to take a break. I want to explore that a little bit further. That's very fascinating. We're talking to Dr. Ellington Darden, bodybuilder, athlete, scientist, PhD, about his latest book, the Body Fat Breakthrough, but as well as we're also talking about some bodybuilding techniques that you can use. You can use as well at home using a dumbbell or using a barbell. We'll continue our discussion with Dr. Ellington Darden on the bright side right after this. Don't go away. Dr. Darden, I didn't quite understand what you're saying about how the negatives work. Why do the negatives work better than the positives, I guess you call them? You said something about the contractions of the muscles. Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, I was saying that these chemical bonds that are formed when you do a positive contraction are very complex. And that sets it up for a great reason to overload the negative phase of the exercise, because these chemical bonds, when they tear or break, they cause microscopic tears in those involved muscles. And those microscopic tears send signals to the body that something is wrong, it needs to be repaired, it needs to be overcompensated for. And that's what causes the remodeling, the growth that can occur if you get enough rest after the stimulation happens. So what I'm trying to get across is that the negative phase of the exercise is the best place to overload and to form these microscopic tears, which lead to the muscular size and strength increases.
So there's more of this microtrauma on the negative. Is that what I'm hearing you say?
Absolutely,
than on the... Okay,
yes.
got it,
yes.
got it. Okay, because it's kind of like you're holding the position, or at least you're resisting if you do it correctly, I suppose you're resisting the drop down or the relaxation. Is that where
you're resisting the forces of gravity, which always move straight down.
Okay, got it.
And by doing that, you can really overload the system by going slower and by using more resistance on the lowering phase of the exercise.
Now, why does the speed matter?
Well, momentum is involved in everything that you lift and lower. And the idea is to keep the momentum to a minimum.
Got it.
Because it makes, going back to the original principle, it makes the movement harder. And, you got to differentiate between weight training, which is what we're talking about, and weight lifting, which is what people do that try to see how much they can push up overhead with a barbell one time. That's weight lifting, and you got to use momentum there. You got to use momentum in a lot of different sports. But in order to build, condition, and make the body stronger, you don't want to have momentum to be excessive. You want to keep it to a minimum. That's why I've always said that lifting smoothly, lifting slowly is much better than lifting fast or in a herky-jerky fashion.
So in other words, you're doing the work, not the momentum, or at least maximizing your work and less momentum.
Yeah, you want the involved muscles to be doing the work, and you want the involved muscles to be benefiting from the stimulation that's occurring.
I'm
it's
very
safer. The whole thing is safer. Too many people get injured
from going fast.
Lift barbells and dumbbells and machines. So I'm trying to cut back on all these injuries that you see.
I'm interested in this idea of the refractory or the rest period. I've always found that's where the muscles are growing, correct? You really want to exploit or you want to take advantage of that rest period as much as possible, the days between your workouts or even the time between sets. Is that correct?
Oh, yeah. And as you know, Ben, there's a lot of new research on sleep, how important sleep is. And then they bring up the fact that most Americans, especially adults, as well as children, are not getting enough sleep. They're finding that most children need at least 10 hours of sleep, and most adults, by the way, especially the ones that are involved in exercise, need at least 9 hours now of sleep, and perhaps even a mid-afternoon nap if you can get it. So, absolutely, if you're trying to get your muscles bigger and stronger,
take a nap.
And that growth takes place when you're sleeping primarily.
How about the idea of the parasympathetic nervous system, activating the parasympathetic nervous system through water immersion or hot baths or deep breathing techniques? Does that have an impact on muscle building?
Yeah, it sure does. I like keeping the body cool by drinking large amounts of ice-cold water. It helps not only the muscle building process, but the fat loss process. Most people are over fat. They need to lose some fat. And then cooling the body, keeping the body, I'm here in Florida. You're in Colorado, but at this time of the year, there's a lot of dehydration you see in football players that are getting ready to suit up and play with, 25 or 30-pound uniform on. Or you can get a heat stroke from dehydration real fast. So the temperature outside, the cooling of the system, very important if you're trying to let your muscles recover and get bigger and stronger.
Now, that leads us into F-bomb or fat bomb, I should say, number 2. You say, how about a cold one? And you got an interesting technique about using the back of your neck. Tell us about that and tell us why the back of the neck is so important.
Well, the back of the neck, there's a lot of people that have done research on brown fat. Now, brown fat is an interesting phenomenon that more physiologists are discovering is is a part of adults' lives. You know, it's been known in the past that children have brown fat. It's a metabolic high type of fat cells that has a different color than the yellowish fat that most of us have around our midsection. This brown fat has a high metabolic rate, and it keeps children warm even when they're in a cold temperature. So this does not atrophy and go away like it was once thought. People have brown fat around their shoulders and neck, and you can get this brown fat to emerge and actually burn more calories by putting an ice pack around your neck for approximately 20 to 30 minutes after a workout. A cold shower works pretty well too, and perhaps getting chin deep in a cold plunge, 52-degree water is one of the best ways to help the recovery and the brown fat mobilization after a workout.
How about is there any such thing as spot removing fat or spot training muscle, like for the gut or for the hips?
Well, you can spot train muscle. You can work the abdominals, and you can work the biceps or the triceps, and you can get growth in those body parts more than other body parts. So you can isolate a muscle and get growth, but you can't isolate fat on your body, on the back of your arms or around your midsection, and that's not effective. You can't spot reduce. The muscle or the fat that you lose out of your body comes from a complicated system of genetics, and most people lose a little bit of fat throughout their body when they start losing fat. And it eventually comes off of the thickest places, like around your waist and hip, last. So,
all right, Doc, we got to take